Welcome to RISEFUEL, where underdogs rise, justice wins, and every story reminds you, no one stays powerless forever. If you love courtroom twists, neighborhood drama, and real feeling battles for what's right, you're in the right place. ****, I actually called the cops on me for trespassing on my own ranch. Yep, that really happened, and she did it with the kind of deadpan authority you'd expect from a Supreme Court justice. While standing right there, my apparently the self-appointed president of a subdivision I don't even live in, thought she had the power to govern my fence, my chickens, and based on her tone, my very existence. What happened next? Let's just say her clipboard wasn't built for the storm that was coming. This wasn't your average HOA spat. This was what happens when a very entitled woman picks the wrong rancher to play neighborhood sheriff with. Stick around, and when it's done, drop a comment. Did she finally get what she deserved, or should I have taken it further? I had just purchased my modest 3-acre ranch, tucked peacefully outside of town near a development called Sunset Hills, my property. About 100 meters beyond their border, completely detached from their world, I was finally enjoying the quiet life with 6 chickens and a small vegetable patch, my escape from a decade of corporate bloodsport and legal wars. The ranch was peace incarnate. Until she showed up. It was a calm Saturday morning. I was painting my old wooden fence green. Then, out of nowhere, Karen descended like a storm cloud, dressed in a stiff business suit, carrying a clipboard like a warrant. Her bob haircut and stiff posture screamed executive overlord, and she walked toward my fence like she owned every blade of grass. "Good morning," she called out, stopping at my line. "I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Sunset Hills HOA. She delivered that intro like she was announcing a federal raid. Her eyes locked on my newly painted fence like it was a biohazard. Her pen scribbled furiously on her clipboard as if documenting the scene of a crime. "As HOA president, I'm going to need you to repaint that fence white," she ordered, her tone flat, robotic, and final. I turned slowly, brush still in hand. "I'm sorry, why would I need to do that?" "The color violates our aesthetic code," she replied sharply, scribbling again, like my fence was radioactive. "But this is private property," I said calmly, pointing to the obvious boundary markers. Karen's face tightened, her gaze turning icy. "That's irrelevant. Your fence affects the look of our neighborhood," she snapped, voice rising. Her attitude made it seem like my green paint had personally insulted her ancestors. Still, I kept my composure. "I understand your concern," I said, keeping my tone even, "but I have the right to paint my own fence." That's when her jaw clenched, her cheeks flushed red, and she laughed, a short, dry laugh dripping with mockery. "Oh really? What, are you some kind of lawyer?" I just smiled and turned back to painting. Double quotes. "No, just a guy who wants to be left alone on his own land." But Karen wasn't done. She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper like it was her ace card. "According to Rule 15.3 from our community guidelines, which I drafted, you're violating neighborhood codes." I stared at it. Handwritten, no header, just ... scribbles. "Did you write these yourself?" I asked, trying not to chuckle. Karen clutched the paper like it was the Magna Carta. "They're drafts, but they're important." She squared her stance. "I will find a way to deal with this." "What exactly are you planning to do?" I asked. "You'll see. We're not finished," she growled, pen aimed at me like a dagger. She spun and stormed off, but not before making a call, glancing back repeatedly like she was planning a missile strike. That was only the beginning. The next week became a circus. Monday brought a letter from animal control. Tuesday, an environmental complaint. Wednesday, building code violations. Every single complaint traced back to one name: K. Mitchell. She wasn't a homeowner. She was a one-woman wrecking crew with a grudge. Animal control sounded exhausted. "She calls every day, sir, like clockwork." The environmental inspector apologized. "We've never seen this many complaints. About chickens, building code, same story. She's called 6 times this week about a fence." It was absurd. She'd weaponized bureaucracy. Then one afternoon, as I sorted through the latest accusations, I heard her voice sweetened with smugness. "I told you I'd find a way," she called out, holding up one of the complaint letters like she'd won an Oscar. I asked the obvious. "You filed all these?" "Absolutely," she beamed. "You're breaking laws." She cited fake violations: roosters I didn't own, smells that didn't exist, noise that never happened. "Karen, this isn't your jurisdiction," I said. "I don't live in your neighborhood." Her voice shot up an octave. "Boundaries don't matter. Your farm affects our values." She said farm like it was a crime scene. Then she whipped out another fake guideline, complete with doodles and chicken sketches. It was ... almost artistic. If lunacy were a medium. "Look," I tried again, "I respect your love for order, but this isn't your land." She glared like I'd insulted her bloodline. "Well," she hissed, "I'll report you for making me feel unsafe." "Unsafe?" I blinked. "When did I do that?" "You said you'd deal with me." "That's intimidation." She twisted my words like taffy, then turned and marched away, muttering about evidence. That night, a neighbor called. "Be careful," he warned. She made a family move over garden gnomes. I finally saw it. This wasn't about fences. It was about power and intimidation, but what Karen didn't know, this time, she'd picked the wrong target. Sunday at 6:30 a.m. I woke to sirens. I looked outside. A squad car pulled into my driveway. A young officer stepped out, calm, polite. "Are you Marcus Williams?" "Yes, we received a report of threatening behavior." And right on Karen emerged, wild-eyed in a bathrobe, like this was her moment of justice. "Thank God you're here," she cried, like I'd been keeping her hostage. The officer looked from her to me, trying to make sense of the circus, but I already knew, this wasn't her last move, it was only her opening act. Asterisk. Though the answer was painfully obvious from her over-the-top entrance, Karen stepped forward with righteous authority. "Yes, I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Sunset Hills HOA," she announced like she was unveiling classified intel, "and this man has been making threats against me." She launched into a wild soliloquy, hands flailing as if testifying before Congress. "Yesterday he said, and I quote, that he was going to deal with me." Officer Thompson turned to me, arching an eyebrow. "Sir, can you explain what happened?" I exhaled slowly, trying to explain without sounding as unhinged as the situation actually was. "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I've never threatened Ms. Mitchell. We've had a disagreement about offense, but I've never said anything threatening, ever." That's when Karen whipped out yet another handwritten note, her prized form of evidence. She raised it, like it was Exhibit A in a courtroom drama. "I wrote down everything he said," she boasted, like a kid showing off her diary. "He said he'd make me pay for this," she added dramatically, in a very scary voice. The officer skimmed the note. It was written in pencil, full of spelling errors, and looked like it belonged in a middle school lunchroom dispute. "Not a police report, ma'am," Officer Thompson asked evenly. "Do you have any audio recordings or witnesses to confirm this?" Karen raised her chin defiantly. "I don't need recordings. I have a perfect memory." Like that was legal evidence. "But the important thing," she continued, "is that he's violating HOA rules. And now, he's trying to intimidate me." The officer's face shifted. You could see the gears turning. He was beginning to grasp what was really happening here. "I decided to clarify the context, officer, when I said I'd deal with this. I was referring to addressing these complaints through legal channels, possibly involving a lawyer." Karen's eyes went wide. "See, he just admitted he's going to sue me. That's intimidation." The absurdity was breathtaking. It was becoming clear, one neighbor using the law, and the other twisting it into a weapon. Officer Thompson asked more about the dispute. I explained the fencing issue, the property line, and the avalanche of complaints Karen had filed with various city officers. As I spoke, the officer's look turned from curiosity to mild disbelief. "Ms. Mitchell, is your HOA formally registered with the city?" he asked. Her posture stiffened. "Well, we're in the process of finalizing our documents," she hedged. "Not exactly the same as having authority." "And Mr. Williams, your property, it's outside the HOA boundaries?" "Yes, sir," I said, pointing to the clearly marked line. "I've got all the paperwork if you need to verify." The officer shook his head. "That won't be necessary. Sounds like a civil issue, not a criminal one." Karen, clearly shaken, made one last desperate grab at control. "This isn't over," she called after the patrol car as it turned down the road. Then she spun to face me, eyes burning. "You think you've won, but I'm just getting started. Next time I'll have real evidence." She stormed off, but when the cruiser disappeared, she remained still by a gate, fuming. That was the moment I knew. The battle may have paused, but the war was only beginning. That week, Karen shifted tactics. Every morning she'd wander her yard, watering plants like some suburban saint, but that cell phone in her hand always pointed at my property. It felt like living next to a failed detective armed with paranoia and a wireless plan. Wednesday brought escalation. I found fresh footprints near my chicken coop and faint tape marks in the soil. Karen had been measuring things, looking for violations like she was on a ghost hunt. When I confronted her Thursday morning, she didn't even bother to deny it. "I have every right to walk on public land," she snapped, even though her footprints were clearly on my property. "I'm documenting your disturbances," she added, waving her phone like it held classified evidence that she was building a case. "A case that proves you don't belong in this neighborhood." She said it with the icy finality of a villain in a courtroom drama. "Are you recording me without my permission?" I asked, pretty reasonably. Karen raised her phone higher. "I'm not recording, I'm just listening to music," with her camera lens aimed at my face. That's when it became clear. This had evolved past a neighborly dispute and was skating the edge of legal harassment, so I decided to investigate her. I started by talking to her neighbors. What I found was as ridiculous as it was revealing. One woman blinked. "HOA? We don't have a real HOA. Karen just says she's the president. Nobody elected her." Another added, "She just hung a HOA president sign on her gate one day and started acting like a mini-mayor. She's intense." Someone whispered, eyes scanning for Karen like she might pop out of a bush. Turns out Karen had crowned herself queen of a kingdom no one asked her to rule. Friday morning, things got even weirder. I was working in my garden when I heard her shouting into her phone on purpose, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. "Find out everything you can about Marcus Williams," she hissed. "He's hiding something. I know it." It was like watching a low-budget spy movie unfold in real life. She was trying to investigate me when I was already a public figure. Had she just Googled me, she'd have found articles about major property cases I'd handled, court wins, interviews, legal op-ed. But instead, she was staging her own budget Netflix thriller. It would have been funny if it wasn't so unhinged that night. I sat in my kitchen sipping coffee and thinking. Karen wasn't going to stop. This had become her personal crusade. She was relentless, obsessive, willing to spin an entire drama, just to assert control. But here's what she didn't know. This ordinary man she was targeting had been watching her build a case, one destined to collapse. And the truth, that collapse was coming soon. Saturday morning, 6A.M.-Sirens.Not 1, patrol car. 3. Red and blue lights bathed my porch like a crime scene. I ran outside, stunned. Karen had escalated again. The lead officer, older and more senior, stepped out. "Marcus Williams." "Yes, sir. We received a report of trespassing and unlawful land occupation." I laughed gently. "Trespassing on my property?" Before he could answer, Karen sprinted out of her house like she'd been camped. "By the window, officers." "Thank you. I'm Karen Mitchell, Sunset Hills HOA president. This man is squatting on land that doesn't belong to him." She was practically giddy. "I believe his paperwork is fake." She declared this land should belong to the community. The officer turned to me. "Sir, do you have documents proving ownership?" "Of course," I replied, already heading to the house. "I can bring the deed right now." But Karen screamed, "Don't let him go. He might destroy evidence." That's when I knew this had gone far enough. I stopped and turned back. "Before I show you the paperwork, there's something you should know." I reached into my wallet and handed the sergeant my business card. "I'm Marcus Williams, property law attorney. This is what I do." The sergeant read it, and I watched as his expression shifted from skepticism to clarity. "You're an attorney?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Been doing this for over a decade." Karen went pale. Her eyes darted from me to the card like she was watching a magician pull a lion from his sleeve. "That's not possible," she whispered. "Ma'am," the sergeant said, "did you know Mr. Williams is an attorney?" "No, he never told me," she stammered. "He pretended to be a regular person." One of the officers chuckled, and in that moment, it was over. The lawyer, the fence, and the second chance ending of Marcus Williams versus HOA Karen Mitchell. Karen's desperate scheme to paint me as a property criminal had officially backfired spectacularly. But he still has to prove he owns the land," she sputtered, though the confidence in her voice had all but vanished. "And he's still violating HOA regulations." The sergeant gave her a look that barely concealed his exasperation. "Ma'am, if Mr. Williams is a property attorney, I'm fairly confident he understands property ownership laws." I stepped forward, calm and steady. "And just to clarify, Officer Mitchell's HOA has zero legal authority over my ranch. I'm located outside their development boundary. And from what I've discovered through public records, the Sunset Hills HOA she claims to lead doesn't even exist." Karen looked like someone whose illusion had just been shattered in front of a live audience. "That's not," she stammered. "I am the president. But the words rang hollow now. Everyone could see it. Her crown was imaginary, her throne, a plastic lawn chair. The sergeant closed his notepad with finality. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a serious offense, especially when it involves property disputes and targeted accusations against someone whose career revolves around legal precision." Karen's eyes welled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." But even she could hear how empty those words sounded now. As the officers turned to leave, I looked Karen square in the eye. "We need to talk about everything that's happened." She stared at me, stunned. The fear in her expression made one thing clear. She finally understood. She hadn't picked a fight with some clueless homeowner. She'd picked a fight with someone built to win. After the squad cars pulled away, I invited her inside. Karen followed like someone heading to her own sentencing. Gone was the bluster. Gone was the arrogance. What remained was a woman unraveling. I poured us both coffee. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup. I asked, as casually as if this were any other Saturday morning. She shook her head, still avoiding my eyes. "Let me explain something, Karen." I sat across from her, calm and deliberate. "When you asked if I was a lawyer, if I was some kind of expert, you weren't far off. My peers call me Ruthless Marcus. 12 years of practicing property law. Never lost a case. Not one." Her cup rattled softly against the saucer. I leaned forward. "What I want to understand is why you thought it was acceptable to harass a man you didn't know. What gave you the right to decide how I live on my land?" Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "I just wanted the neighborhood to look nice. Your ranch, I thought it brought the property values down, and there it was. The first time she'd told the truth, so you filed false complaints, measured my land, hired someone to investigate me, called the police and claimed I was squatting on my own property. All because you didn't like the color of my fence." She nodded miserably. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said, tears now flowing freely. I just got so angry when you wouldn't listen. I looked at her evenly. Karen, do you realize the legal jeopardy you're in? She didn't answer. You've committed harassment, false reporting, unauthorized surveillance, and made baseless claims to law enforcement or against someone who teaches law students how to dismantle cases like yours. Her voice cracked. Are you going to sue me? I took a breath. That depends entirely on what happens next. I laid it out for her every legal avenue I could pursue. Civil suits, restraining orders, defamation claims, the whole gauntlet. Karen crumbled. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't know who you were. I would have never done this if I had known. That's the problem, Karen, I said. You didn't care who I was. You assumed you had the right to control others simply because no one challenged you. Her voice was raw now. I lost everything in the divorce. The house is all I have. I was afraid, so afraid. Your property would destroy its value. That's no excuse. But I was desperate, and for the first time, I saw it beneath the ego and hysteria. There was pain, not justification, but explanation. Here's what's going to happen, I said, tone softening slightly. You're going to write apology letters to every agency you contacted. You're going to stop claiming to lead a fake HOA. You're going to leave me alone, and you're going to get help because this isn't just about fences. Karen nodded like someone clinging to the last rope thrown their way. If you follow through, I finished, I won't take legal action. But understand this, you ever harass me or anyone in this neighborhood again, I will make sure you face the full consequences. She nodded again, speechless. As she left, she paused in the doorway. When I asked if you were some kind of expert, I had no idea. I nodded. The answer is yes, Karen. I'm exactly the kind of expert you should have been worried about. A week later, I found a letter beneath my front door, 3 pages long. A full confession. Karen admitted to everything: false reports, unauthorized monitoring, and fabricating a role that never existed. She asked for forgiveness. 2 days later, she came to my fence carrying an apple pie. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, but I want to thank you for not ruining my life when you had every reason to. I accepted the pie, invited her to sit on the porch. You could have had me arrested, you didn't. Karen, I said, I didn't do it for you. I did it because I believe in second chances. I moved here for peace, not to wage war. She nodded. I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand why I felt the need to control everything. I know it doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm working on it. And strangely, I believed her. Over the next few weeks, Karen kept every promise. The false complaints were retracted. The surveillance stopped. The neighbors began to breathe easier. Karen even started volunteering at the animal shelter, perhaps finally learning how to help without hurting. A month later, she returned to my fence. Some neighbors are considering forming a real HOA, she said, with actual bylaws and legal structure. They asked if I wanted to help, but I told them they should ask you. They want me to join an HOA. I asked, amused. No, she smiled. They want you to be the legal advisor. The irony was rich. I appreciated. I said, but I'm retired. Still, I can recommend someone solid. As fall rolled in, my ranch became something of a community hub. Children played with the chickens. Parents stopped by to chat. Or people became a regular visitor. Not as a tyrant, but as someone rediscovering her humanity. I understand why you painted the fence green now, she said one evening. It suits the land. White would have been awful out here. I smiled. Still green, I said. Still beautiful, she replied. This time, she meant it. 6 months later, I was painting that same fence when my phone rang. Mr. Williams, the voice said, I've got an HOA nightmare. False reports. Manufactured authority. Someone told me you're the guy to call. I smiled. I'm retired. But I know just who to send you to. As I hung up, Karen passed by on her walk. Another HOA mess, she asked, having overheard. Yep, I said. It seems like there's always someone trying to control what doesn't belong to them. Karen shook her head sadly. I can't believe I was that person. I looked at her thoughtfully. You know, Karen, when people call me ruthless, they think it means cruel. But that's not what it means. It means I'm relentless when it comes to justice. Sometimes that means going to court. Sometimes ... it means mercy. She hesitated. Why did you choose mercy for me? I watched the sun dip behind the ridge because you weren't evil. Karen, you were scared. Evil doesn't change, but scared people can learn. She nodded slowly, understanding the difference. Thank you, she said, for seeing that. As she walked off, I watched the chickens settle for the night. Strange how the person who tried hardest to break my peace had become a quiet part of it. That's the story of how HOA Karen tried to call the cops on a man for living on his own land, not knowing he was a lawyer called Ruthless Marcus. But the real twist wasn't that I was an attorney, it's that sometimes the most ruthless thing you can do is forgive.